Good morning and good evening. I'm James Albright. Mrs. Dorothy Barbour, for whom we have gathered to remember, was an educator in the purest sense of the word. She would probably hate that word, educator. She was a teacher. She was my teacher, and a teacher of many of us. Being with her in class was transformative for many, and especially for me. And for this, I'm eternally grateful. And, truth be told, somewhat in awe. Mrs. Barbour passed last week, and the world is a less cheerful, less knowledgeable, less thoughtful place because of her passing. We miss her. Mrs. Barbour, as she preferred to be called, or Dot, as we dared to name her behind her back, shaped my development as a student and eventually as an educator. Over my life, approximately 150 teachers have tried to teach me. As a school principal, I was responsible each year for the performance of another 100 teachers. Many were good, a handful were great, but Dorothy Barbour has always been my North Star. I knew that she was important to me in that way that we remember those who show us a different path, a better way. When she gave me a D+, considered a low grade in the world and the absolute atomic bomb for mine, I was initially devastated. Here was a subject, history, that I loved. In a school, GIS, that I loved. In the class I was falling in love with. And my work was abysmal? But in that clear way she had, she explained that we would have to earn the marks. We would have to work harder than ever to demonstrate our learning. What better lesson for teenagers to hear? I have so many memories of this stellar educator. Her stories of dancing with Leopold of Belgium, her undying love for all that is Scotland, her academic standards, her lilting Scots accent that rolled you through the Highlands. I was a scandalous student for Mrs. Barbour, but we got along famously. This was the first International Baccalaureate history class at GIS, so we were all finding out what that was about. I pursued that line, the IB, until I retired 2 years ago. I remember rearranging all of her desk drawers. Students in those days were allowed in the classrooms before the teacher showed up. I remember erasing Scotland from every map of Europe that she would draw on the board. I remember developing a deep understanding of the two world wars and how they were intertwined. I remember her exasperation when declaiming after someone, perhaps me, said something and then a bunch of guys. There can be a bunch of bananas and a bunch of grapes, but there can't be a bunch of guys. And there's only one guy, and that is Guy Fawkes. When word started to spread about her passing, friends and fellow former students poured out their thoughts and memories of the unforgettable Mrs. Barbour. She taught history in her own way, humorously, full of brio, and yet deeply challenging all of us. I have gathered a few of my fellow students' comments. There were many about their Mrs. Barbour, and I would like to share a few here. Susan Bornt. I loved Mrs. Barbour. My love of history came from sitting in her class and seeing the timeline of the British monarchs on the walls of her room. That, and I learned that people from Scotland were Scots, not Scotch. Sarah Blazer. I can still hear her voice as she welcomed us to her modern history class. I'll always remember learning to sing It's a Long Way to Tipperary, and how she expertly navigated teaching a bunch of teenagers in her signature dress and heels, and managed to hold our attention and garner our deep respect. Karen Brandt, you awaken the importance of history for our future choices in life and in me. I always used to think before joining your class that history was for old, boring people. After my first class with you, I found myself looking forward to the next one and the next one. You told the stories so well with that lovely Scottish accent of yours, and they stuck forever. Debbie Bartlett Robson. Rest well, Mrs. Barbour. You were a true delight, and I can still recall your lessons on the Renaissance artists. You loved to teach, and we always knew that. I've told my own kids many times about the time you taught us all to waltz, because every proper lady and gentleman should know how to waltz. Laura Hester. I was just thinking of her incredible lessons that incorporated music soldiers sang as I walked through a museum yesterday. I've also have her voice in my memory on every visit to historical sites in Europe. She was a truly amazing woman and possibly the best educator. Rocky Pensavana. I remember Mrs. Barbour played Tchaikovsky's 1812 Overture on LP record in her class to teach us about Napoleon. That day she taught us history and an appreciation of classical music at the same time. And Brent Ellison. Dorothy Barbour was my favorite teacher of all time. Her scarlet lipstick, her fingernails and toenails, navy blue polka dot tailored dresses with a tied bow and sash at the neck, her heavy breathing when she spoke. "I am not a horse," rolled her R's. "I do not eat hay." When we Americans said, "Hey, Mrs. Barbour," we learned the World War I songs, "It's a Long Way to Tipperary," "Mademoiselle" from Armentières, "All of the Rivers in Europe," history, "The Right Way." God, how I love that woman. She has stayed with me all my life. She has made such a difference in my life. I have told so many people about her. Teaching is important work. In a teacher's life, they may provide guidance and instruction to thousands of students. Teaching reaches out beyond the individual and helps shape the community in which they live. The efforts of the greatest teachers resound through the years. Mrs. Barbour was that kind of teacher. I am the conduit today for heartfelt thank yous to Mrs. Barbour for all she did for her many students and colleagues. Mrs. Barbour, you were loved and you are missed.